NowBoarding, the official boarding area podcast, would like to welcome aboard all listeners. This nonstop service includes interviews, reviews, and insights from our talented crew of bloggers. Episode number 10 is NowBoarding.
Joining Captain Ed Pizza in the cockpit today is Lee Huffman from BaldThoughts Budget Travel Blog. Make sure those tray tables are stowed, your seats are in the upright position. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the episode.
Hey, welcome back, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of the NowBoarding podcast, the official boarding area podcast. This week, I've got Lee Huffman from the BaldThoughts blog on boarding area. Hey, Lee, thanks for joining us.
It's great to be here, Ed. Hello, everybody.
Hey, we got a lot of ground to cover because on top of a blog, Lee is getting ready to join us in the podcasting world. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into things. I've known Lee for probably a little bit over a year now, and we've had a lot of fun sort of exchanging barbs and sarcasm over the internet. But I'm actually looking forward to learning some things about Lee that I don't know, and we're just gonna dive right in. Lee, how did you develop your love for travel?
Well, my dad was self-employed as a bankruptcy attorney for me growing up. And we used to go on road trips to national parks. We used to go travel to see family that was more on the East Coast and in the South. And that's really kind of how everything started. One of the funniest stories actually about that is, I think I was maybe about 5 years old and my brother was about 15. And we were driving probably across some random stretch of highway in probably Texas or New Mexico. And we were talking with this guy that was a big rigger, on the CB radio. And somehow my dad thought it was a good idea that he allowed my brother and me to go on the guy's big rig.
Oh, wow.
And, they were driving, side by side for a while. And then apparently my dad got stuck behind some cars and he lost us. He had no idea where we were.
I don't mean to laugh.
Yeah.
I mean, as a parent, it's scary, but it still is funny.
Yeah. And today you couldn't do that. I mean, you would
No.
get Child Protective Services called on you in an instant. But I mean, it's just like a really cool thing. I used to talk to everybody on CB radio growing up as we were driving around the world. And it was a lot of fun. So that was like really my major entrance into it. And then when I met my wife, Anna, about 12 years ago, we really started doing a lot of traveling on weekends using the Southwest Companion Pass and my SPG points and the timeshares I own. And we would just go here and there for a weekend. And it was kind of a running joke between us where she'd go, well, you never really take me on dates. I said, well, would you rather go on a date or would you rather go away for the weekend to like Chicago or like, just any place else? And so that was really where a lot of that started going. And then I really started getting into the miles and points because I thought I knew a lot. When I had the companion pass, I had my SPG points, and we were being able to travel a lot of times, like 2 or 3 times in a month. And then all of a sudden she wanted to go to Paris. And I'm like,
Honey, Southwest doesn't fly there.
Yeah. I'm like, you sure you don't want to go to Philly or to like Seattle? And she's like, no, I really want to go back to Paris. I'm like, okay, let me figure it out. And that was really where I started getting into all the miles and points and realized that I was like Alice in Wonderland, looking through the wonder glass and figuring out that, wow, there's a whole nother world out there that beyond anything that I thought I knew.
Yeah, isn't that incredible? I remember, thinking I knew everything in the very early days when I was a big American Airlines flyer, and then I found Flyer Talk, and it was like, oh my gosh, there's like this world is endless.
Yeah.
There's so many tunnels.
Exactly.
And I think it's important to clarify too for folks that are listening who may not have found you on the internet yet, that at this point in your life you've sort of morphed into more of a family traveler. So tell folks a little bit about the clan that you travel with.
Yeah, so my wife and I, we've been together 12 years. Actually, we'll be married for 9 this fall, and I have a son who's 7 and a daughter who's 3, and they've both been traveling since they were 6 weeks old. Both have global entry, their passports, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, and I can't advocate that enough. I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole, but for folks who are family travelers with kids, I hear so frequently, "Oh yeah, we haven't taken our kids on a plane yet. We want to wait."
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Well, what do you want to wait for?"
Exactly.
Well, we just want to wait until they're a little bit older. And I'm like, not like get them started early so they learn the routines.
My big thing is your kids are much more sturdier than what we give them credit for, right? And if they like know that like travel is like the thing that they do, they're gonna be cool with it. If you make it a big deal, like, oh my god, we got to get prepared, and they're gonna pick up on that anxiety, they're gonna pick up on that nervousness, and they're gonna be nervous to travel. But if you just go, oh hey, we're going on a trip this weekend, they're gonna go, oh sweet, let's go, and they're not gonna have any sort of problems.
Yeah, I agree. We started our kids young, and I think it's the thing that you do when you introduce your kids to travel young is you certainly do break down those barriers of fear around travel, but I think you also help show them a different perspective on the world. I think that's just I don't think there's a greater gift that you can give your kids, but I'm certain I'm biased on the subject.
No, for sure.
So, how long have you been blogging, and what made you start? What made you want to start a blog?
Well, I started in December of 2012, and really it was kind of like a journal of some of the things that I'm doing, um, wanting to show people and inspire them to travel too. Even though my wife and I both work, and we had limited vacation time from our jobs, that it's okay to just take long weekends here and there, and it doesn't have to cost a lot. And both then as well as now, my focus has always been, you know what, even if I can save somebody a couple $100 or even a couple $1,000 on a trip where they can take a trip every year instead of saving up 2 or 3 years to be able to take a nice vacation, to me that's a huge win.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely a huge win. For me, the reason for starting a blog was similar to yours. I wanted to start recording stuff. I sort of had two purposes as well. I wanted to make sure that I could answer questions sort of globally for everyone. Back when nobody really knew what a blog was, it was like, okay, I've typed the same email 10 times. Let me just put it somewhere, and I could direct people to why do you use this credit card, or why do you focus on, say, the Southwest Companion Pass. And I think that is a good side question for us here. What made you focus on the Southwest Companion Pass? There are a lot of folks that I know that have never heard of it and didn't figure it out till much later. What made you zone in on that?
Well, I've had it for 13 years now, and it's just, to me, it's the greatest benefit possible. Of yeah, it'd be great to fly in the apartments and take a shower in the air and things like that, but to me, being able to save enough money where I can travel far more frequently with my family, that's huge. And I used to work for a bank, and when I was on the sales side, I had a client who was a travel agent, and he said, you know what, pick a credit card from one of the different airlines and just stick with them. And you're much better off, at least back in the day then, you're much better off getting that specific co-branded card. And I'd been flying Southwest because they were, more economical than everybody else. And I just kind of went with that. And luckily for me, I started picking up the companion pass because both my spending, as well as I allowed my dad to use my card for his business, and put all his business expenses on there. And so we just racked up a lot of miles and points that way.
And where were you living at that point? Because obviously, 13 years ago, I remember Southwest, but at that point, Southwest was absolutely more of a a secondary or a tertiary airport sort of airline.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I've other than just recently when I moved to Nashville, I've always lived in the Southern California area. So Orange County and LA, that's where I lived all my life.
Yeah, and Southwest definitely had a decent presence there. I remember back in the day, we had Baltimore was the only airport in the D.C. area, and they still had back then the last row of the plane, the seats faced each other, so you sort of had the party row in the back when they had the old flight attendant uniforms and all that stuff.
Yeah, I remember one of the times when my wife and I went to Boston, we actually couldn't fly into Boston. We had to fly either into Manchester or Providence, and either had to take a bus or a train from one of those cities to Boston. So always an adventure. My wife, luckily, is very forgiving with all my nonsense. But overall, she gets to enjoy some of the benefits of it as well. So
Yeah, Southwest was a huge part of the growth of Providence. I was at college there and watched them grow many moons ago. But they were absolutely a secondary city kind of airport back then.
Hmm.
And I guess when you were jumping on originally, you also had the good fortune of being able to take advantage of back when it was all just flight credits and 16 round trips, or sorry, 16 one ways or 8 round trips got you a free flight no matter what the length was.
Yeah, no, and being the finance guy, I realized, I can fly all these $49 flights that are within California, and then all of a sudden now I have a pass where I can fly anywhere they fly across the U.S. So I'm like, that sounds pretty awesome to me.
Yeah, we had Tiffany Funk on recently from One Mile at a Time, and she admitted that she was a Southwest flyer back in the day, and it was like, hey, I've got these flights across the country, and gosh, I wonder if I can find connecting flights instead of nonstop, so I can pick up more segments and get more free tickets. Cool. All right. Well, let's stop right here for just a second. We're going to step aside for a commercial break, and we're going to come back and talk a little bit more about how you like to travel and why you're jumping into the podcast world. We'll be right back on the NowBoarding podcast. The NowBoarding podcast is brought to you in part by Norwegian Air. Norwegian is one of the fastest growing airlines in the world. The low-cost carrier is based in Europe and continues to connect cities that have never been connected before. Their most recent flights include nonstop service from Florida to Rome, Madrid, and Stockholm. They've also launched new service from Montreal to the Caribbean and from the Toronto area to Dublin. With a fleet of brand new 787 and 737 MAX airplanes, they're making the world affordable for thousands of travelers. Welcome back to the NowBoarding podcast. I'm sitting down with Lee Huffman from the BaldThoughts blog. Lee, you've been on boarding area for about 2 years now?
Yeah, just a little over 2 years. I had the fortune of Angelina Ocello introducing me to Randy actually about 3 years ago. And we courted each other for a little while and finally able to join the family a little over 2 years ago.
Yeah, I remember being down there when you guys were onboarding. So, when we think back over the last 2 years and where you guys are focused, if folks out there are trying to figure out what sort of questions you can answer, obviously Southwest and companion passes sounds like a tie on the list. But what other topics are things that you sort of consider in your wheelhouse that you can help folks with?
Well, I basically I try to combine my love of finance and my love of travel and a lot of things that I write. To me, it's like a virtuous cycle. If you take care of your money, it means that you generally have a better credit score. You have a better credit score, you can get the best cards. You get the best cards, now you can save even more money on your travel, and then you can use that savings on the travel to boost your balances on your savings accounts, your investments, paying down your debt, and then that just ends up getting an even better credit score. And so it's if you do things the right way, it's just going to snowball in a really positive factor for you. That's kind of where I came up with my slogan of travel more, spend less, and live better. And so really a lot of the focus is on nowadays it's on family travel, a little bit about finance, and like you said, my favorite airline is Southwest. I write about them quite a bit. Kimpton, I write about them quite often. A little bit less now with now they merged in with IHG, but yeah, overall I'm a lot better at earning the points than I am at spending them. Although I'm that broken clock is right twice a day, and I was able to actually book a $7,000 trip recently to St. Kitts for my wife and family and me in a few months, where we redeemed one of the travel packages for Marriott. 330,000 Marriott points got us a week at a Category 7 in St. Kitts and 120,000 American Airline miles. And now that we're here in Nashville, skip and jump over to the Caribbean. And it's only 15,000 miles, each person, and about $28 in taxes each way. So overall, not a bad haul for a little bit of points.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, and Nashville's not a hard place to get places like St. Kitts, and American has always had a little bit of more of an enhanced presence down there. So I'm sure you've got a bunch of great ways to get down to the Caribbean. I Unfortunately, being up in Dulles, American has sort of landlocked me with them abandoning Miami after they abandoned San Juan a few years ago. So getting to the Caribbean for me on American has become something of a challenge. So, as far as your travel goes, you mentioned, traveling for work, back in the day. As it stands today, what would you say your split is between work travel, if you will, and pleasure travel when you're out on the road?
Well, now that I moved here to Nashville, I actually quit my job. I used to work in corporate finance for a regional bank. And now I 100% of my time, I'm either blogging, freelance writing, or starting up the podcast. So pretty much nowadays, everything I do is, a kind of a mix of business and pleasure. So because
Hmm.
there's always a trip report to write, best things to do in blank city, and just trying to focus on some of the things that are really going to help like deepen the experience for when you travel.
Yeah, and that's a great segue to the podcast question, which is, what is it that's got you interested in starting a podcast? I know how I got bit by the podcasting bug. Anybody who knows me knows I love to talk and probably too much. But what is it about podcasting that's got you interested?
Well, I think one of the main things is that no matter how much somebody loves your blog, there's a limited time where they're going to sit there and read it, right? But with the podcast, whether they're commuting, walking the dog, and you're going for a run, whatever it is that they're doing, I mean, you can be in their ears for half an hour to an hour at a time, and people will just binge on them. I mean, when I used to live in California, my wife's family lives in the Central Valley, about 4 hours away. Everybody else would fall asleep. It's just me, Red Bull, and a podcast for 4 hours, you know, and so I really just started liking the podcast, and then now that I have a little bit more free time, it's something I've been kicking around for a while, and so you know what, let's start it up, and kind of like the name of the podcast is We Travel There, so it's the We Travel There podcast, and really it's all about speaking to locals in all the different cities you want to travel to, and getting their local perspective on what are the best things to see, eat, do, and drink in the city that maybe you don't know about because you're just looking at like the top 10 lists of what to do in that city. So to me, it's all about having a better experience, experiencing a little bit more like a local, and possibly falling in love with the city because you had a better experience and not just hit the basics.
Yeah, and for folks that are tuning in live to the episode this week, Lee is on the verge of publishing. So once they're up and running with a bunch of episodes, we will update the show notes so you'll have a direct link on where to find those episodes, which should be fairly soon, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's going to be launching in September, and one of the big things also with the podcast is I'm not just interviewing bloggers and podcasters and people that are kind of quote unquote in the biz. Uh, there's a couple people that have signed up already that are just normal people, right? That they have their
Awesome.
normal day job and they just happen to love their city and know a lot about it. So if anybody's interested in being a guest on the podcast, has a lot of great stories to tell, and would love to share some of their local insider tips and tricks for their city, love to have you on the podcast.
Awesome. I can't wait for it to spin up. When I started podcasting, I started, as you say, binging on others, and I try to add one new podcast a week and pick up tips for what I can do with my two podcasts. So looking forward to having another one on the slate. We're going to step aside one more time for a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back to spin through some lightning questions with Lee Huffman from Bald Thoughts. The NowBoarding podcast is brought to you in part by No Jet Lag. Don't let jet lag get you down. There are flight crews, sports teams, and business executives all around the world that sing the praises of No Jet Lag. No Jet Lag is the leader in jet lag management for the last 25 years. Don't let jet lag spoil your next trip. Visit nojetlag.com to get yours today. And we're back to wrap up this week's episode of the NowBoarding podcast with Lee Huffman of the Bald Thoughts blog and the We Travel There podcast, soon to be launched. All right, Lee, let's get down to it. What's one of the best destinations you've ever visited?
Well, actually, if you don't mind, I'm going to actually talk about three different experiences that I have. And so the first one was about almost 2 years ago. I took my wife in business class. We flew to Italy for a week, stayed at a lot of high-end hotels like the Waldorf in Rome and the Park Hyatt in Milan. And we stayed at the Cinque Terre on the East Coast. Oh, sorry, the West Coast of Italy. Just a fantastic trip. Unfortunately, we kind of live on an island by ourselves. We don't really have a lot of family nearby. We have a lot of friends that are like family, but there are the instances where we can just spend time together alone without kids are kind of few and far between. We love them, but sometimes you need a break.
Yeah.
And and so just being able to have that trip and be able to spoil her and just do some amazing sightseeing and eating and staying at these high end resorts, it was just phenomenal.
Well, you've hit on what my favorite place to go in the world is. I'll frequently get folks who will say, "How come you don't have more dots on your map? How come you haven't been to Asia or South America more?" And I frequently the plane ends up frequently turning in the direction of Italy. I can't help it.
For sure. And then, so the second one was I took my son during his spring break a year ago to the Grand Cayman Islands, and we just I'm a big Kimpton guy, and they had their first Caribbean resort called the Sea Fire
Yeah.
on the Grand Cayman, 7 Mile Beach, and it was just, my God, that place is like you died and got into heaven, and it was just awesome being able to make that trip with him. You spend a whole week there with him. Go swim with the
The stingrays.
yeah, the stingrays. There we go. Yeah, we went to Stingray City.
Yep.
We went to the Starfish Beach. It was just so many fun things to do, and he's finally kind of at that age where he's going to remember a lot more, and he's able to do more because he's a little bit more physically mature and mentally mature. And it was just a great experience being able to do that. I've loved being able to travel with him and kind of show him the world, which kind of leads to the third one with my daughter. She's total mama's girl, right? She loves mama. Like everything is mama, no matter what happens. She gets mad at me and she just kind of looks at me and goes, "Mama," so and so being able to go on a trip just solo with her, quite honestly, was a little scary. I wasn't sure how it was going to work. And again, the frugal guy inside me, she was like, "Oh, 22 months old." I'm like, "Okay, we got to go on one last trip before before she turns 2. That way she can fly for free." And
I love
so
it.
Kimpton was opening up their property in Milwaukee, and I said, "Oh, let's go there for the weekend." And probably wasn't the brightest idea because it was January, and so if you're
Ooh, yeah.
familiar with Milwaukee in
Oh,
January,
yeah.
it's probably not the best time of the year to visit. Uh, you got to wear
Probably
like
not.
3 jackets, But overall, it was a lot of fun. We had a great time. And it was one of those opportunities for me to be able to bond with her without having mom around. Whereas, like, if she's tired or grumpy or whatever, she turns to me instead of mom. And then that's just like to me, a special feeling as a father.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And I've got one boy and one girl, so I've certainly worked on developing that same bond. I can't say that I contemplated developing that same bond in Wisconsin in January. I think we can only describe you as committed if that was the decision that you made, was that Wisconsin would be a good place to hang out in the winter. But I commend you for that, and I will admire from afar on that one.
Well, I will say this: even if it's cold, the faster you walk, the warmer you get.
This is true. This is true, and we've enjoyed Grand Cayman as well. It's such a wonderful place. 7 Mile Beach. There's some awesome restaurants, and Stingray City is definitely a unique experience as well.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely enjoy all of those places. So let's talk about favorite credit card.
Yeah, again, we talked about a lot of people, have strong preferences one way or the other. But for me, uh, all else considered equal, I always reach for my Southwest card. A lot of people will probably throw tomatoes at me right now for saying that, but overall, it's the thing that helps me get that companion pass every year, and I need to make sure I hit those 110,000 points, because that to me is a huge savings for me and my family.
Yeah. Do you think that the new priority card is a fit for you?
Yeah, I'm gonna reach out and upgrade for that, because I mean, yeah, it's $50 extra on the annual fee, but you're getting more points on renewal. You're getting that $75 credit each year, and
Mm-hmm.
right there, just those two benefits alone make the card worth it. If you're gonna have any of the cards, that's the one to get.
Yeah, and I would think that. By the way, folks who are just tuning in, there's a new Southwest Priority credit card that came out not too long ago, and that's what we're discussing. I think one of the other benefits of the card is you get a few free upgraded boarding slots. Now, it's not early bird boarding. This is something that you buy at the gate. But in theory, if you're traveling with folks other than yourself that don't have the companion pass, that could also save you a few bucks in terms of getting them on board early
Yeah,
if
for
you're an
sure.
early bird buyer.
Yeah, you get 4 of those a year, and most of the time I'm traveling with my family, so I get the family boarding, which is fine. But on those instances where I'm traveling by myself, having those 4 opportunities to board early is definitely key.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so I'm curious on the next couple because you said a couple things earlier on. I'll see if the answers hang through. I think I know the answer to the next one, but favorite airline?
Yeah, for all domestic flights and quote unquote international light, the way I like to call them, Southwest for me is the way to go. A lot of people don't like the boarding process, but quite honestly, I don't like the boarding process of a lot of other airlines where you're like a running back trying to fight through the defensive line to get to the gate. You're dealing with all the gate lice, right?
Look. I've been a United and an American frequent traveler, top tier for well over a decade, and I've never liked the boarding processes. And I say, in the beginning, I didn't like the Southwest boarding process until I understood it. And then you also notice too, folks don't tend to bum rush the gate anywhere near as much on a Southwest flight. They sort of understand the dance, if you will, of how it's done.
No, for sure. Yeah. And so to me, like Southwest is the one for domestic. If I'm going to the Caribbean a lot of times, or even to Mexico, I used to love flying from John Wayne down to Cabo. We would
Mm-hmm.
fly that flight all the time, and obviously sometimes a little frustrating, right? You don't get a lot of direct flights, and you got to fly through places. But to me, the savings, both from just paying for their fares as well as having the companion pass, makes it worthwhile to have to deal with just a little bit of inconvenience. But if I'm flying internationally, like if flying to Europe, uh, I almost all the time I pick American Airlines. Those are the ones I learned from a long time ago. That was like when my wife wanted to go to Paris. That was the airline that I chose. I back then, they had that the double browser trick.
Yep.
Get the cards, and then the Fidelity 100,000 a deposit. For the listeners who don't know about that, basically Fidelity had a program where I don't remember how many bonus miles you can get. I don't remember if it was 50 or 100,000 bonus miles, but if you deposit at $100,000, you can get all these bonus miles. Well, obviously, I'm not writing a check for $100,000. I don't have that type of check to write. But overall, you can deposit and withdraw, deposit, withdraw, deposit, withdraw until you met that 100,000. So every week, I was depositing and withdrawing $8,000 out of that account until I hit the magic number of 100 to get the bonus. So
The good old
yeah,
days.
for sure. So they're getting too smart for us now, but we're always trying to figure out the next loophole.
All right, so I'm going to be curious on the next one because you sort of alluded to goods and bads here with Kimpton being acquired by AHG. Is Kimpton your favorite hotel chain?
Kimpton's still my favorite right now, and again, it's hard to be like a hotel chain on its own since it's not part of IHG, and things have changed, and it's not quite as lucrative as it used to be. Um, for people that know, there's a thing called Chicago Seminars, and I was actually giving a presentation there last year on Kimpton, talking about how rewarding their program was going to be, or how rewarding it was. And then Friday morning, 24 hours before my presentation, they announced all these changes to the program. So at the last minute, I had to like revamp my entire presentation, and I kept reaching out to the Twitter team and to the customer service team trying to get answers, and it kept giving me conflicting answers, and so it was a pretty stressful 24 hours. But overall, I still like the people, and I still like the resorts, and in some ways, I'm happy that they were bought by IHG because now they're expanding quite a bit. They got a location in Paris coming out. The Amsterdam opened a year or two ago. Toronto's coming. A lot of Asian properties coming, so they're expanding far faster than they used to. But some of that comes at a loss. The people aren't quite as in sync with the old Kimpton ways, and
Right.
so that's kind of the give and take, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Culture is a tough thing to grow rapidly, and I think Hyatt has seen some of the growing pains here and there in that, which is my favorite hotel chain. I think it's tough to replicate culture on scale.
Yeah.
It's just it's just one of those tough things. All right, so let's wrap up with just one more question. Given the places that you've been, either on your own or with the family, what's one place that's still on your bucket list? One like favorite nugget that you're holding on to and you can't wait to get there?
I think one of the next places we're going to go is Greece, and I think it's probably going to be a trip just my wife and me. And she's been wanting to go for a couple of years, and it just things just haven't worked out recently to be able to go. We've always either something else has come up where it popped up higher on the list of places we want to go, or the award availability wasn't quite there. And we kind of take like a more chill approach to things, and we have like a top 10 list of places we want to go, and to me, it doesn't really matter if I go to number 1 or number 5 on the list, because we all want to go to all of them eventually anyways. And so, just whatever we can go based on the time of the year, if there's certain festivals or certain weather that's better or worse, and then also based on the award availability. And we just kind of go down the list. We start at the top and work our way down and see what we can figure out. And then wherever we can find the best trip possible, then that's where we land on the list.
Yeah, my philosophy is pretty similar to that as well. I look for great deals. Like recent, even though I didn't jump on it, the recent Hong Kong Airlines business class mistake fare to Asia for $600 ish.
Yeah.
I look for opportunities like that, and that was actually how we got to Greece. Was a bit of a mistake fare a number of years ago, and have been back since and loved it. Well, Lee, thanks so much for jumping on with us on the NowBoarding podcast. When you're not hopping on here or planning your own podcast episodes, where can folks find you?
Well, just find me at BaldThoughts.com for normal blog posts. And then if you're interested in being a guest on the show, or just want to see where we're getting ready to go as far as the recordings, go to WeTravelThere.com /guest if you want to be a guest, or /map if you want to see the locations that we've recorded, that are scheduled or that are in the queue.
Awesome. Great. Hey, Lee, thanks for being on, and we'll talk to you soon on the Miles to Go side as well.
Sounds great. Thanks, everybody.
All right, guys, we'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning in to the NowBoarding podcast.